Welcome to day 241 of TFIF 365. And today I just want to tell a personal story or something from my perspective, because there's a conversation going on that is counter to supremacy-free, coercion-free, discrimination-free, and exploitation-free. And it is the literal demonization and dehumanization of people who choose, one, not to have kids, two, not to be married. And I put it in that order because it appears now that the most important thing, or what people care about, are people having kids. And I just want to talk about it from my perspective, because a lot is missing from this conversation, particularly people who are married with kids having conversations about this. So for me, marriage and kids felt like a straitjacket lined with poison ivy and throw in some fire ants for a little spice. Nothing about any of those roles felt like anything to me but bondage. Nothing about it was liberating. And I felt this way for a long time and did not have the language to articulate it. But I consciously remember it when I was 15 and my mom had another baby. At 15, I just saw that in the household, and I was just like, I don't want that in my house. But I didn't have the language for it, particularly in a society that is the default. It's like having kids is what people do. People don't even think about it most times. And so you have people who go to great expense to have families. And I never wanted that. I never had a biological clock to tick. I never had any of that. And yet the narrative and so let me talk about the marriage piece too, because I've never met a man who I felt, and I'm now with the language of that, could handle all of this, could make space for me to be my authentic self, not feel threatened, and they in turn would feel that they have the same thing to be their authentic self and be made, and space be made for that. I've never seen it. I've never dated it. I've never seen it in my friends' relationships. And so for me, most of my life, because that was the default, marriage and kids was the default. If nothing else, kids were the default. I just assumed at some point it would happen, but I never planned for it. It was just like, okay, it'll happen. And when it didn't, it became, I have to admit, like, oh, I dodged a bullet. Because I know that who I was then, I wouldn't have been a parent. I would have been a parent who inflicted childhood wounds and traumas on somebody who, as an adult, would have to unpack it the way I'm unpacking my shit, right? And I didn't want to be responsible for that. Now I sit back and I think, I didn't want to be responsible for that. And it's so funny because the narrative with many very bigoted individuals, it is to say that those two were not only were my only roles, but because I abdicated not filling any of either of those roles, then I have no value. And I haven't said anything about it because it seems ridiculous to me. Not only do I have no value, but the fact that because I have no kids, I'm not tied into the future, and so have no stake. And that's just funny as hell, because my whole work is about starting to build something that I know I won't live to see manifest. And that is what makes me different from parents. There's a selfishness to parenting that I see so often, and which made me a great teacher, because I saw my peers behave in ways with their children which they wouldn't do for somebody else's children. Ignore their boundaries, disrespect their boundaries, push them in ways that were more reflective of the parent rather than what the child needs. There were a whole lot of things that I see parents doing, living through their kids. I mean, that's what I spent my whole education career is being that objective as possible third party in things. And I was able to see things that parents weren't able to see and help them bridge a gap to better facilitate healthy relationships with their child. And I don't take that for granted, and I take fucking pride in that. And as I said, even with this work of supremacy-free, coercion-free, discrimination-free, exploitation-free, the whole theory is called the future is free. I'm it. There is no future me in the future. And I'm still working every fucking day to help those people who do have investments in the future ensure that their legacies improve, that they're not transferring generational harm and trauma to their kids. And so I just wanted to bring that up as a single person, because there is a bias. And this is a bias that, and I'll end with this, because this is a bias that many folks, particularly with kids, do not want to have a conversation with. I'll just say, we'll talk about in the workplace. As a person with not married and kids, it was always the default that I would stay behind. I'm not doing that, because Mary and Joe had to go to their kids' graduation, some kind of event. Their child was sick. So it is assumed that the person who is not married and with no kids will take the slack. And that's not, wasn't going to happen with me. And then there's a part of that I have to say I'm still struggling with, because even as I'm looking at Harris roll out her policy agenda, and this is what I talk about, the coalition of the wounded, outside of the economics of businesses, I don't see anything that specifically addresses the needs that I have. So if I didn't have a house, I could get the $25,000 as a first home buyer. And maybe there's some other things that I have to look into, but it's the economic stuff that everybody gets, right? Everybody is in part of that. But then there's some specific stuff that parents get. And that's always happens. And yet I have to sit back, because that's when I talk about, that's why I don't believe in equality. That's why I don't believe in fair. It's about equity. And that's what gets me not to a place where I don't resent parents. I can tell you that much, because how many of you roll around in this world as if you're better because you could procreate is astounding to me. Where I know that many of you are, and I'll be honest, envious of those who have not made those choices, because we can live differently. Not that you regret having kids, it's the fact that my money doesn't have to go to, I can do what I want to. I can spend my money on how I want to. And again, that is what we talk about. It's about equity. It's not about tit for tat. It's not about you have one and I have one. It's about, I see in this society that you have kids. So yes, you need additional supports if we're talking about having a healthy future, right? So I can respect that. But I can tell you that it does trigger me, because and I'll end with this, because it's the parent who only recognizes that the sidewalk is broken when they have a stroller, and did not give a shit that the sidewalk was broken for that person who was on crutches in a wheelchair. And so those are the things that when I talk about, we have to address our own internalized supremacy, coercion, discrimination, exploitation free. How do we situate in this world? How do we show up in this world where we expect others, or we put ourselves above others because of the situations we're in? So that is what I wanted to talk about, because I'm just seeing all these conversations about people with no kids and married must be unhappy. I'm not unhappy. I have a great peace of mind. I have a great sense of self. I love my life, and I can lean into it, and I enjoy every moment of it. And so that's what we have to stop doing. It's, again, the most privileged, creating a situation where two demographics feel that they have to fight for the same 0.01% of resources and value. And that's we have to stop playing that game. We have to stop playing that game and recognize that as the coalition of the wounded, we all have work to do. And if we're talking about a more equitable future, we have to lean into everybody's role who's in this. Everybody has value, whatever their lived experiences are. So until tomorrow, peace. Become a sustaining sponsor at kimcreighton.com/support-the-work and help make this work happen.